Hello and welcome to the Modern Consultant. I'm your host, Mark Aarons, and on today's episode, I have the pleasure of being able to host Mollie Eastman. Mollie is the founder of sleepisaskill.com. She's been a longtime friend, but also an advocate for helping me to improve my own sleep, as well as to be able to help hundreds, if not thousands of entrepreneurs improve their sleep at this point as well. In this episode, we talk about sleep apnea. We talk about figuring out what are some of the symptoms that you might be having poor sleep, or even if you don't have poor sleep, how do you continue to improve the sleep that you already have? Because it is just a foundational pillar of our health, which is then a foundational pillar of any business or career that we are trying to build, and also affecting our personal relationships. There's no part of our life that sleep does not impact. And for that reason, I made it a personal focus to dig into this for over 1 to 2 years, going deep down this rabbit hole. And if not for Mollie, I would not have been able to have gone the distance and to be able to have improved my own sleep quality, which then is going to result in me having a longer quantity of life and longer and better quality of life as well. Listen to this episode. You owe it to yourself. And if there's someone in your life that you care about, that you want to help them have a better quantity of life as well as quality of life, listen even closer, because she's going to share things that she often would share just with her private clients. Thank you for listening to this. I can't wait to see you on the other side. Mollie, I just want to say thank you for being on the show. I've been looking forward to this. You have been instrumental in my own sleep journey, and I have many updates for you. People would have heard the intro, but if somebody didn't know who you are, what you do, could you tell us?
Absolutely. Wow. Well, that was such a cliffhanger. I'm so excited to hear the latest with your own sleep journey. I know I've kind of been a part of some of that conversation over, it has been years now, maybe years, right? So I can't wait to hear that piece. But yes, for anyone listening, little backstory. I am Mollie Eastman. I own Sleep is a Skill, which is a company committed to helping people optimize their sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And one of the things that I think you share beautifully on your website is your own journey that led you to even launching Sleep is a Skill. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
100%. Yeah. And I hope that it serves as kind of an anchoring for people listening, that no matter where they're at in their own journey with their sleep, whether they just like to improve it a little bit, they're really, really struggling, or, anywhere in between. My story is one of complete transformation with my sleep. And what it looked like was one of my lowest points in my whole life was related to this breakdown around my sleep. So I now think of my life as kind of this 3-part kind of story. And what that looked like was, in the first half of my life, a lot of labels and narratives with my sleep. And I would say things to myself like, oh, well, I'm a short sleeper. I'm a night owl. It's just in my genes, or I'll sleep when I'm dead. All of these ways of looking at my sleep as if it was fixed and I just had to kind of survive this lot in life was how I kind of related to these things and how I set up my kind of reality. And over the years, I didn't correlate these changes in my health and my well-being. So what that kind of shook out to look like was I was getting sick more and more frequently, getting anxiety, having the beginnings of an ulcer, shingles in my 20s. Wow. Probably not a good sign. Look at the body is not loving whatever I'm doing. And the whole time I'm not correlating how I'm managing my sleep and my health. And it wasn't until I went through this total breakdown with my sleep and really experienced my first true bout of insomnia, and just night after night after night and not being able to sleep. And it really, really shook me to my core, because I had a history with my family of a lot of people navigating down these roads of pharmaceuticals, and then really being beholden to taking pills routinely, particularly around sleep. And so because I'd seen just a lot of the scary kind of realities that they went through, navigating that world, that really, really scared me, because then I thought, oh no, this is my moment. Now this is what's happening for me. I'm going to need to be medicated for the rest of my life in order just to do something so seemingly like primal as sleep. So that lit the fire under me to really delve into this. And when I dove into the world of sleep and what it really takes to get not only just survive sleep, I had been doing, but to actually not only get back to that baseline, but then to optimize sleep. And in my own life, that completely changed my whole experience of what, one, I thought was possible for me, because I didn't even think, great sleep was available to me. And two, just my whole experience of my experience of waking up and actually feeling rested and feeling good throughout my entire day into my night, which just was a total paradigm shift. So what ended up happening from that place, once I restored my sleep, I could not stop talking about it. I'm just, blabbering on to anyone that will listen. And suddenly small groups started kind of merging and forming. And now on the other side, now we have Sleep as a Skill, which, is really set up and designed to help people that are also struggling with their sleep or just want to optimize their sleep and bring things to the next level. Is available to them through, podcast episodes, newsletters that we send out every week. But it's also grown. We have a particular niche in poker, which I think is pertinent for a lot of people just because it represents really, think of casinos designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. So they're the great kind of use or case studies of looking at, even in those environments, how we can improve sleep. But we're also in hotels and luxury hotels like Hotel Casa Cipriani in Manhattan and others. So it's kind of gotten this whole world built up around sleep optimization. And I say all of this because for the listener, I'm truly astounded that sleep in our modern society is a skill. So many of us have gotten so far off the path of what great sleep can look like and might not even think that it's, available to them. Like I related to the topic. And if you are sleeping pretty okay, then what is also there is the ability to really take things to the next level.
There are at least 3 pathways in my mind as far as where I'd love for this, because that was just an amazing story. Pathway 1 is just even the intentional choice of the name Sleep is a Skill, because I'm a doctor's son, and so my brain just immediately expanded that out to be like health is a skill. And I love it, and it reminds me of my own journey through knee surgery, recovery, and retraining the body to walk, because I was immobilized for several months, and having the mindset of, wait, no, it's a skill, I can improve at this, allowed me to not just accept that my body was going to be in chronic pain for the rest of my life. And there was this part of the story that you shared where it's like you had accepted, that, hey, this is what it is. I don't sleep well, and this is life. This is, and so it's for anyone that's listening in, we'll get into my sleep journey as well. Like I think it's so important for us to be able to pay attention to the whispers that the body is trying to share with us to be able to, help us stay alive, ultimately, is what it's about. There's another piece of what you shared that is a jump off for a question that I want to ask, because you're going to have some people who are listening into this who are very new on their sleep journey. You have some people who are more like biohackers and stuff, very much like a Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, 4-hour body kind of crowd.
Totally.
What are some of the signs that we should even pay attention to if there might be something that is really troubling with our sleep? And then what are some of the signs that we could even if our sleep is okay, improve it, make it even better?
That's so many great points there. Yes, sleep is a skill, 100%. And I hope that reframes things for people so that it doesn't just feel like, oh, well, my dad was a poor sleeper. It's in the genes or whatever, however we might relate to things. That instead, just like any great skill, we can start at 101 and really learn the fundamentals. So having said that, then as far as what are some of the signs that we might have some work or room to up-level our sleep. One, I hope we can begin to even just get fascinated, I hope, with this thing that we do a third of our lives. On average, 26 years of our lives are spent sleeping, and yet we often, talk or think so little about ways that we could really, really support this process. But then even beyond that, what is this thing that we do? I mean, a really popular book in this world has been Dr. Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. And there still are a lot of questions as to why we do this thing. But some of the things that we seem to know is that consistency is king with our sleep. So if you are finding a lot of inconsistencies with your sleep and your sleep-wake cycle, that even to begin can be a cue. So we want to always kind of be like the friend that you go out and the friend that still always wakes up with his, regular time that he wakes, and maybe begrudgingly, whatever it looks like, but he's always getting up at around that same time, or she. Super important, because we want to kind of have this routine systems and schedules for our sleep by which we're awakening at around the same time and getting sleepy at around the same time. If that's not happening for you, those key signals, which is really our cortisol pulse on the first half of our day and our melatonin pulse on the end of towards the end of the day, those are clearly then not firing to the degree that we would like to see them at those key times. So if those bookends of your day, those hormonal bookends are moving all around, that's a big problem for us. So one, that. Two, we want to also understand our fatigue level. If we're experiencing just a lot of fatigue throughout the course of the day, aside from maybe just a kind of more normalized slump a bit in the afternoon, which kind of does align more with our circadian knowledge that might kind of happen, a siesta, if you will. But if we are just really, really struggling throughout the course of the day, yet another sign. And then for those biohackers, of course, your data can help tell you. And believe me, I'm data fiend. So certainly we can speak about that and how to use wearable data to help support that journey. But then also ensuring that we don't necessarily have, there's over 80 different sleep disorders that are out there that we could be dealing with and we might not even know. And I'm assuming one that we might speak about with you is sleep apnea, which Absolutely. Is so common. And it is sadly often very much missed. And you do really need to advocate for yourself often, because unfortunately, just systemically, the average primary care doctor has around 2 hours of training in the world of sleep, this thing that we do, 26 years of our lives. And that's out of Harvard Medical School. That's their report. So some of the best schools in America anyway, are dealing with this kind of breakdown. And so you want to make sure that you're advocating for yourself, that if we feel like there's any sort of respiratory disturbance, and sleep apnea comes in stages, as well as other breathing issues. So like upper airway resistance syndrome, kind of generalized mouth breathing, and some of these other issues that can come about if we are struggling throughout the course of our night with a sleep disorder. So those are some key things, but also standing in that curiosity of, is my sleep as kind of rich or up to the level that it could be, and investigating all the details that are a part of that.
I love that. And I love the segue as well, because for me, I am a performance-driven individual. Like if you look up my Strength Finders profile, achiever is number one, front and center.
Totally. It fits. That tracks for me with you. Totally. Yeah. Love that.
And also in the top 5 is learner, and thankfully they go together, and one of the things that I've learned about myself is just through just natural observation, just how performance, both physically as well as mentally, just suffers if I have bad sleep. And one of the interesting, I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, but I used to have just these nightmares when I was growing up. And I had recurring dreams of suffocating in my sleep as a child, like night after night, night after night. And I then started to lucid dream so that I could start to move my body and wake myself up, because in the dream I was like, oh, it's happening again. And then it'd be like Kill Bill. I'd start, okay, wiggle your big toe, wiggle your big toe. And then like try to start moving. And then eventually I would flop my arm. And because I was also suffering from sleep paralysis as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, body, wake up. Because in the dream I couldn't breathe. And it turned out that in reality I couldn't breathe as well. And so I had to I would throw myself off of the bed to wake myself up. It worked. It was painful, but it worked.
Jeez. Okay.
And
I did not hear this story.
fast forward, like 30 years later, you and I get connected, through a fun mastermind that we're a part of. And you lovingly kept prompting me like, hey, maybe you should get that checked out. Hey, you should probably go check out like a sleep study. And then eventually I did. And then thanks to you, I found out that I had sleep apnea. And game changer. As a doctor's son, I love a good diagnosis because, okay, now the problem is named and I can do something about it.
100%.
That's usually how my mind thinks about it. But then I dug into my family tree, and it turned out that it runs in the family, and that there was someone else, an uncle in England, I think, had also done a sleep study and found out that they also had sleep apnea. I was like, Mom, would have been nice to know this a little bit early, but we have the information.
Here we are. Yeah, totally.
But then, again, thanks to you, I then did the sleep study. I got hooked up to 15 million different diodes, and then they did the thing. And then eventually, I got one of the CPAP machines. And then the first night after, I was like, oh, I didn't know. Oh, this is what oxygen while I'm sleeping feels like. This is fantastic. It was just night and day.
Literally. Well, you got yourself through night into the day without choking and flailing around.
Pretty much.
That makes me so happy.
So I just maybe this podcast is just a big excuse to thank you. And it's literally changed my life. And then it taught me that all these things that were happening that I took, like, I was just like, oh, this is just normal, that none of it was normal. It's like the teeth grinding being a sign of sleep apnea, to, just all of these different things my body was trying to do to open up the airways inside of my throat so I could get more oxygen. And just all these different signs. And so I'm curious, I share all of that because I want to open up this conversation, particularly for somebody who might be earlier on in their journey. And hey, maybe they have sleep apnea, maybe they don't, maybe their sleep can be improved. But what are some of the signs that we might have crappy sleep? But what are some of the common signs that you see with your clients that sleep might be crappy, but they just take it for granted that, hey, maybe this is just what it is?
Yeah. Well, wow. I'm so glad you shared about that. And just really, it makes me so happy to hear, because sleep apnea, it's one of those things where we see people, we might think, oh, isn't it so silly and cute about people snoring, or just, oh, they've got just a little bit of mild apnea, or kind of waking themselves up and what have you. But we might poo-poo it or not take it seriously, and the fact that you took all these steps, because I know sometimes, unfortunately, I think we're, a work in progress as a society to start prioritizing this, but unfortunately, often it can be kind of these disjointed steps that you have to take, and making sure to follow up and get the insurance coverage and this, that, and the other. So the fact that you did that, and the fact that you pointed to some of these signs that people might miss, like what you said about the choking, is actually a very common thing that can come up with sleep apnea, where people can have experience. They feel like people might describe it as feeling like they're drowning, or they're having some sort of breathing issue. Choking, though, is a particular word that comes up a lot. And then sometimes it can look like having a lot of these intense dreams from a element of many of the times that we remember dreams are because we're interrupted, and, we're awakening, and kind of tethered to that awakening is the memory piece of that dream. But if we're not awakening as often, then we might not experience the memory of as many of those dreams in that level of intensity. So I'd be curious if you are finding, if you're dreaming, the dream piece has changed at all. Have you noticed any of that?
You opened up a can of worms. You are so right. I hadn't considered that, and you're 1000% right. Even last night.
Okay.
Like, I know that I have gluten sensitivities, allergies, but I love pizza.
Yeah, totally.
I don't always get gluten-free pizza.
Yeah.
And also, there's a bunch of I'm in Brooklyn right now traveling, and
wow. Man,
just one of the homes of Jamaican food inside of the United States, and so I got a Jamaican beef patty, and but crust gluten. So
yeah,
and then before bed, and then I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. I was like, I had the craziest dream. It was violent too.
Yeah, totally.
It was crazy.
Yes, and also for anyone listening that knows that they have sleep apnea, one of the ways that we can help lower these apneas, because I think that's another thing that people might not realize, is that you have a say too in the number of apneas. You can either wildly increase them, which hopefully we wouldn't want, or you can kind of dissipate them through some of your behaviors, and some can be immediate, like sleep positioning, but others can be behavioral in things like our weight, and things like how much we're eating at what time, so volume and timeline. And the quality too. There's interesting studies that have shown that if we're having a lot of kind of what they put it in the category of kind of junk food or processed food, as opposed to whole food, seems to uptick the number of apneas that people might see. But certainly that late night eating, and kind of more inflammatory type foods, maybe putting in the category of, say, like a gluten or dairy or both, seem to bring that about. And then there you go. Then you have the dream. So 100%. So for anyone listening that's saying, well, I don't know if I have sleep apnea, what are some of the signs that you might notice and think of? Well, some are ones that you might have heard of that are just very kind of potentially more out there in how we think about apnea, which is, of course, the loud snoring. That is certainly just snoring in general. You want to absolutely get tested for, as far as, no matter if there's presence of a lot of snoring, we want to get tested. And we don't want to have snoring regardless across the board. We want to do a lot to help support that. There actually are even daytime treatments, like Excite OSA is approved, FDA approved, for snoring and mild sleep apnea, which a lot of people don't even realize there's things you can do for just snoring. But certainly snoring, if you're awakening with dry mouth in the mornings, morning headaches, super common one. If you're having difficulty staying asleep, so you might fall asleep, and I hear this a ton where people are like, oh my God, I have no problem with sleep. I fall asleep the minute my head hits a pillow, which is also a huge red flag for us that something is actually problematic with our sleep. Because why are we so sleep deprived? It should actually take us a little bit of time, not an egregious amount of time, but maybe around 10, 15 minutes or so to actually transition from an awake brain state to a totally weird altered reality, which is sleep. And so it should take a little bit of time. And so also then throughout the course of the day, are you just really struggling with an immense amount of fatigue throughout the course of the day? Um, and then also just episodes of kind of difficulty of breathing, which can go in alignment with what you were sharing with that like choking. So people that, if you have a partner in your bed, if they notice that you're stopping breathing, of course, throughout the course of the night, all of these things can be signs. But also in the past, we might have thought of people's waistline and their the size of their neck and things of that nature, which certainly also do correlate, but there also are plenty of slender people. I mean, I know you take care of yourself, all these things, and so we might think, oh, well, then we're good to go. But it turns out there's all kinds of people that just anatomically or hormonal changes. And if you didn't have sleep apnea, even times when you tested like years back and things have changed in your life, hormonal shifts, certain changes in, kind of musculature, even though the tongue and other things, then you might have sleep apnea now where you didn't have it before.
I think you might have saved a life just now. Okay.
Right? And you've seen too, it's just so huge. The cardiovascular health alone for people, blood pressure, heart rate, HRV. So for those biohackers, a lot of those stats that we're looking to impact, if sleep apnea is there, like good luck transforming any other area of sleep if we're not addressing. That's like the ship is sinking and we're doing all these little tweaks. Oh, have some magnesium supplements or what have you. Like, okay, well, we got to address the huge, huge hole in that ship, which is any sort of breathing difficulties.
Ooh, and so again, as a doctor's son, I appreciate a great diagnosis, and it was hard to get that when I was trying to get scheduled for a sleep study, because as it turns out, Washington, D.C., where I'm based, apparently a lot of people have troubles with sleep. There's a whole deep rabbit hole and stories of that we could probably talk about.
Totally.
But
Yep.
if anyone's listening to this and has been thinking about it, don't wait, because it took me months to get scheduled with a sleep center, and then there was a nationwide shortage on the CPAP machines, which I was prescribed for to help with it, and so then it's like it could take 6 to 9 months from when you first decide to try and deal with it to actually get some resolution with it. And you don't, I hope that's not someone else's experience, but the possibility exists.
Yeah, 100%.
You're not the only person with sleep problems in America or in the world.
Totally.
The other thing I want to talk to you about, though, Mollie, which you have just this breadth and depth of expertise on, are all of the available options for being able to quantify sleep. If someone is wanting to understand more about what their sleep looks like without necessarily getting into like a sleep center, what options exist, and where would you recommend they even start?
Well, I love that you use that word breadth, because that's actually one of the things I think of for consumer wearables is, while they might be lacking in some of the kind of scalpel-like precision, or at least that we try to have in sleep labs, which also have their own problems, but still kind of our gold standard. So whereas consumer grade trackers, one of the things they really shine in is that breadth of data that they give you across. For many people, if they start wearing some of these wearables, like some of the people that come my way have been wearing certain sleep wearables for years. And then we get to see kind of this whole story emerge around some of their habits and what we're seeing with their sleep, and then some of their interventions that they might have brought in, or environmental shifts, and how all these things show up in their sleep results. So that's really one of the cool things that I find for bringing wearables into the conversation. When we think about wearables, lots of different options, but for sleep trackers, I mean, for me right now in 2023, I'm still recommending for people to use the Oura Ring for sleep. However, there's a lot of great other ones too. Whoop is doing some fantastic things for sleep. BioStrap, Apple, Garmin. You can even use like Muse headbands, and other things are emerging for tracking your sleep. But then there's also apps that you can use. So Sleep Cycle and others, but also for tracking that concern that we're talking about with some sort of sleep breathing trouble. So things like Snore Lab are helpful because, and I think we'd actually maybe talked about that with you, right? That was part of your story too, I think. Yeah. So, you just put the app on in your environment and get a few nights of data. And then we can see, is there kind of audible snoring in the space? Even because some people say, well, I don't know. I don't have a partner. I sleep alone. So who knows? But then that's another thing that's just affordable, and you could just easily do that like tonight. So all of these things are ways that you can track. And then even there is the old school analog manual way of sleep diaries, which have their own benefits too. I would definitely suggest a merging or hybrid of the two of those. So kind of logging your subjective experience with your objective experience on some of the wearables.
So I really like the Snore Lab reference because it's extremely accessible in that the device that you're going to be using it to measure is your smartphone. If you're listening to this, you're probably listening to it on a smartphone right now.
Yeah.
So you have the equipment.
Yeah, exactly.
You can literally go into the App Store, Google Play, wherever to go look at the app right now as you're listening to this. Or if you're watching it, then you probably have again on your phone or desktop, and again, you could go check that out right now. It's these sorts of things, particularly because the science of behavior change. If you could just get going on it right now, at least you've taken the first possible step towards improving, one's life. What are some of the most surprising things you've learned since launching Sleep as a Skill and working with as many clients as you have?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is meal timing. You mentioned about that with the being in Brooklyn and the pizza. I feel you. Oh my gosh, right there with you. It's the best pizza in the world, it feels like. So meal timing, I find really, really fascinating, and how much that can show up on our wearable data. So one of the things that we've amassed is one of the largest databases of Oura Ring users specifically for sleep optimization outside of research and what have you, and dynamically be really in there with their data on a really granular basis. So we've got people tagging things and all kinds of data that we're able to extract what's going on with people, with their sleep and their health. So one of the more profound things that I just see on a routine basis that people really struggle with, and I understand why, is that meal timing piece, and are often surprised by how much of a difference measurably we can see in things like heart rate and HRV, and HRV being heart rate variability, if we just simply move back the timing of our last bite of food. And ideally that we're not having all these glucose unstable food options as well. So we're stabilizing our glucose, and then kind of having that clear ending time that's really often much earlier than a lot of people might consider. So for example, I know Brian Johnson's getting a lot of press in the news right now from the biohacker perspective, like you were speaking to, for, kind of becoming the most quantified man. And he's gotten a lot of press around the fact that his last bite of food is around 10 hours before bed. And that's honestly right around in alignment with what I'm doing, some form of that. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, because people go nuts on that part, I'm not saying that people need to do that, but I am saying that there's this bio-individuality, and then that there's some interest in and some real measurable changes that we see for people's health and sleep come up when we play with that last bite of food and just moving it a little bit earlier. Now, the generalized recommendations are and this is from the reigning circadian health researchers around sleep. And right now, I often reference Dr. Sachin Panda from the Salk Institute, who wrote Circadian Code, a great resource for anyone curious on this topic of meal timing and how that affects your circadian rhythm. his recommendations are from 2 to 3 hours before bed, having your last bite of food at least, but then there can be that possibility of a wiggling, of playing with even earlier. And so I've seen interesting benefits even 4 to 5 hours before bed. And also the difference that people often see on those sleep stage classifications, which are less accurate than some of the other metrics on most wearables, but still could be a little noteworthy from how dramatic I often see of a change when people bring that in. So that's just one top of mind, really measurable one.
Okay, this is fantastic. Based on your experience, do your clients favor one kind of alcohol versus another?
Oh, good question. Okay, so the alcohol piece, one of the lowest hanging fruits most often for the average person is to really, really minimize alcohol intake because we just see it show up so often on our sleep results. And I would say that's one of the most routine things that I find people that across the board when they get wearables that over time they start to minimize the number of alcoholic beverages that they have because of how much they see it measurably having an impact on their sleep. So then what can we do? Well, one, it's truly timing. So the earlier you can move your alcoholic moments, then the better. So boozy brunches, aggressively early happy hours, all of those highly recommend. But also the best alcohol I've found to date that doesn't seem to impact our sleep results in the same way are hard ketones. So they're derived from ketone esters, and they do not seem to have the same hit because they're ethanol free. And ethanol is one of the bigger kind of hits to your overall health, and that fragmentation of your sleep seems to really come about when you have something that has ethanol in it, whereas those hard ketones do not have that. Other things that we actually have on our store page, a whole thing devoted to alcohol alternatives because it's such a big topic, because you still want to have some sort of state change often, but we want to find other things that are not going to hit you as hard. So that would be one. Things like Dry Farms wine, now those are still going to hit you, but they are lab tested, no sugar, not having sulfates and all these other extra things that a lot of drinks might have. And then, but that one's still kind of controversial because some biohackers will also say wine across the board is going to be inflammatory and problematic. One of the cleanest sides of alcohol seems to be one of the clearest. So vodkas, potato vodkas, oddly. Yeah, it's interesting, right? But that's really clean. And then, of course, not having like sugar and all those things that are going to further mess with your blood sugar. But still, you're going to for sure still see those. And if you have sleep apnea, you're going to likely see some flare-ups in apnea. So other things can be kava is a common kind of alcohol alternative. So kava, and now it will even come in kind of like a beer-like looking package. So you can get things like kava, or kratom is one that we're starting to see pop up. So one popular line is called Feel Free. So it has kava and kratom in it. Then other weird ones that I might have people try from, this is again biohacker playing, intranasal oxytocin. So you can up the nose, have a little oxytocin, and just like love everyone.
Nice.
And then another one that always gets weird looks is microdosing of nicotine, which people say, what? But again, micro, and from really clean sources from one of the ones I suggest is Lucy Gum, kind of the biohacker's choice. Their new mantra is nicotine for normal people. Of the sort of previous rap that we might think of for nicotine. But certainly if people, and granted, you won't want to do any of these things all the time, but what I've found for people is it can be something where they're at the bar and all their other friends are doing, which alcohol for some reason has gotten this like, clean bill of, the normal cool thing to do. But it's one of the worst hits on our health and well-being. Whereas if everyone else is drinking and then you have a little bit of like a Lucy Gum, I promise you're not going to hit your sleep stats and your health stats in the same way that you would from that same, glass of whatever. Now, that one gets more layered, probably a longer conversation, but exploring other state changers that do make you feel different but then without sacrificing your sleep.
We both have hard stops, but
Yes.
there's like 3 quick lightning tidbits. Going to sleep, light before sleep. Sorry, lighting before going to sleep.
Yeah.
Difference, should we use red light? Should we avoid blue light? Also, does it matter if we have using a sleep mask versus using blackout curtains? Talk a little bit about that part.
Totally. Okay, so in your actual bed while you're actually sleeping, you want to have be able to kind of pass the hand test. So putting your hand out in front of your face, if you can still see your hand, keep working to further black out that room. Even if it's just that little sliver of light coming through, that little thing, like take the steps. It's annoying on the front end, but it will serve in dividends. And there's really many studies that can point to this. You're not just being neurotic. You really are doing this for a reason. It can help with that overall sleep quality, less sleep fragmentation. So total blackout in your sleep kind of haven. But in all the environment that you're in those hours leading up to sleep, you want to be bathing in darkness. And this is really, so post-sunset, the reason we want to bathe in darkness is because melatonin is known as kind of the hormone of darkness, the vampire hormone. And so all these things are said because in order to produce sufficient melatonin in the night, we want to be bathing in that darkness to make that melatonin kind of grow to the point that we want to have to both fall asleep, but then also stay asleep throughout the whole course of the night. So what you want to do is really ensure that you have next to no, that's kind of referred to as alien lights at night. So kind of man-made night lights at night for the most part that have blue and green lights within them, which is most lights that you're going to find. And the reason for that is that those can both, and mainly blue light, disrupt your melatonin production. So what would be the alternative? Ideally, candlelight would be the ideal, but I get that some people have kids and cats and whatever. So red light would be the suggestion there, although you just don't want it to be like a blinding, those red light biohackery panels. Probably don't want to use those super late into the night and, brighten up like right in front of your eyes and what have you, because any bright light, it's just you want to mimic and overlay anything you're doing with how would we have done things ancestrally in nature for thousands of years. And what is really, truly, the first biohack was fire. And so it's our ability to, kind of artificially extend our days. And so we want to mimic how things would have been in nature. So the best way to do that is to then just kind of have some things that we would find in nature, like a fiery hue is really rich in infrared light and red light. So we're trying to mimic that, but we're also not having it be egregiously high lux output, like LUX. And you can measure this with even phones, free apps, lux or light meter. You can see how many lux are in your environment. So you want a really, really low in the evenings, and then really, really bright by day. So that's a big part of it, is you want high amplitude brightness by day, really dim in the evenings.
Thank you for that beautiful answer. Looking at the clock, I'm going to save the 2 other questions.
Future interaction.
Yes. Because I love that you said that, because I want to have you back on. There's so much more for us to talk about. That's like, one, I just enjoy our hangouts as always.
Yes, me too.
And I know this is going to help so many people. So thank you for taking the time to do this. And if we wanted to find out more about you, where should we go?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I always love our hangouts. Amazing. Love what you're doing. And if people are struggling or just curious, hopefully that's the other piece of this, is I think every single one of us on this planet could serve from having a more circadian aligned lifestyle. So if you're curious or struggling or anywhere in between, sleepisaskill.com is the place where you can do a lot of different things. So one, you can take a sleep assessment and you can get kind of tailored information back around what's happening with your sleep. You can sign up for our weekly podcast. You can get our weekly newsletter. We've been doing it for almost 5 years every Monday. And then if you are struggling, then we have different courses, one-on-ones, and other things that all are having you tracked with a Oura ring so that we can see measurably, for someone like yourself, right? Like the numbers can really help us tell the whole story that our behaviors are having a say in our sleep results, and to see those trends can be really fulfilling for people.
Thank you so much. You are amazing. And I'm going to see you in Austin at some point.
Yes.
We'll figure it out.
Let's do it. Okay, fantastic. Well, in the meantime, you enjoy Brooklyn, but this was fantastic as always. I love our interactions and more to come.
Hey, thanks for checking out the show. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button and also subscribe so you don't miss another one. It also tells us which ones that you like the most so that we can then do more interviews like that. If you want to go from idea to implementation though, especially if you're wanting to productize your expertise so that you can scale your impact on your clients and of course grow your business, then join our email list. There we're going to talk about how modern consultants can productize their expertise so that they can have a greater impact on the world around them and live life on their terms. If that's up your alley, I hope to see you on the other side. Talk soon.